Dave, thank you so much for the talk. It was really interesting. I've done a little bit of work. I study at the London School of Economics, so in misinformation, disinformation. Um, so my question in general was obviously in the talk that you discussed the difference about misinformation, disinformation specifically being about the intent to harm. So how do you really distinguish between the two when you identify content online between misinformation and disinformation? And really, is there a point in doing so? And also, like, I guess just to follow up, should social media users then be equally reprimanded, I guess, or whatever extent you can actually, do to chastise them, I guess. Should they be equally reprimanded, for unknowingly spreading disinformation compared to actively, spreading disinformation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult set of problems. Teasing it apart, sort of requires a decent amount of knowledge of the space and, knowing what kind of patterns exist, but being able to trace things to origins. I'll give you a weird example. There's a Facebook group called Taste Life, which is all about little cooking videos, and it looks harmless enough, and it's got like 25 million followers, and it's run by the Falun Gong, which is this Chinese cult, and it's kind of like, why is the Falun Gong aggregating a 25 million viewer site on cooking videos? That's weird. So stuff like that also kind of falls into these weird middle grounds where it's kind of they're doing what amounts to an audience aggregation operation first, and then may or may not deploy harmful payloads through those channels that may or may not look like disinformation or misinformation or propaganda or God knows what. So there's a lot of different kind of stuff out there. So it does help from a forensic standpoint to be able to differentiate between stuff that's just goofy rumors versus stuff that's really sponsored by some entity with some specific intention in mind. And then in terms of chastising folks, I tend to frame it more in terms of just educating. If you let people know that something is being produced with the intention of causing division in society, and you can prove that it's tied to a state actor or something, they're much less likely to then go and share it out. And they also will not necessarily dispute the truth of the payload as so much as what is trying to be done there. So just broader societal education about this stuff, I think, is also very useful.
Dave, thanks. Daniel, thanks. Niraj, do you want to ask your question? Are you still there?
Yeah, thanks, Richard.
Who's it aimed at?
It was anyone could answer. The question was, which is the biggest challenge you guys have faced? Is it defining a clear vision, or finding the right technology, or finding time and money, or is it something else? If you could just share which is the biggest challenge you shared and how you overcame that.
If we can start with a quick word from John, perhaps, on that, and then get Alice's views and see how we're doing for time, if that's okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh, good. You're still there, John. Great.
Yeah, I mean,
James.
the biggest challenge that we faced was really merging the right technology with the social cultural issues that we were facing, and also convincing people that partnership was the way forward. Because once we're able to do that, as we're doing right now in a practical perspective with our platform, for example, we see that we can get a lot of things done without even having physical cash, or without necessarily. So I mean, those things themselves equate to money, and I like to talk about practical things. So the way we started a month ago officially with our beta, and the scale at which we have had has taken us so far because of understanding the social cultural issues, being able to convince folks a partnership as a form of collaborative growth makes more sense, means we don't have to worry too much about money we don't have, but extract the value of what we have, which also equates to money, and create win-win ecosystems. So that's been our biggest challenge so far.
Thanks, John. Alice, do you want a recap of the question, or do you remember Niraj's question?
To be honest, I completely agree with John. I would say that, it's not just convincing partners to kind of like collaborate in the first place, but it's also to convince them that using this technology is is a greater benefit than risk, because usually they see it as a risk kind of like factor, because first of all, they don't really know the outcomes. They cannot really expect anything specific because usually they haven't used it before. So they can't really see the benefits straight away. Usually they see the huge risk factor of like a lot of money being spent and not so much impact. So we have to do a lot of work of on educating them how to use AI to kind of like bring the best results, and also how to communicate these results to their funders, for example. So this is usually kind of the biggest challenge for us.
Thanks, Alice. Paul Levy, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, a very simple one, really. There's a lot of great stories we're hearing, and it is possible to measure good, and we've been doing that for a long time, particularly in development and charity work. Are you already, as more use cases of this develop, able to identify which aspects of the AI that you bring in are actually having a measurable impact on the good that you're doing?
Anyone in particular? Should we ask Ruth to answer that one?
Well, I think that, I haven't really thought about an answer, but I think that the way I'll say that answer is that it's the best way to drive the impact is how much it is being adopted. What's like any startup, like if you're building a product, build AI like build your startup. I always say that, if your solution and technology is being adopted, is being used, then it's good and it's success. If it's not adopted and if you're just building something that no one is using, then it's a failure. And that's the way I will define a success, actually.
I mean, I'd say possibly to add to what Rua said. I mean, we think about, first of all, building a solution that affects the life of people, or at least affects some kind of change, which is still commercially viable. There's no problem with that. Then in doing that, then we then figure out what part of this solution actually needs any AI or machine learning, and how much machine learning or AI does this solution need, and at what time. And that's kind of how we approach the significance, the outcome, and what the effect is for people, because the solution itself is the first thing that affects their lives. And I give you a practical example. If people are, in savings group in an informal financial ecosystem, and the first thing you do is you digitize them and you give them visibility and you make them credit worthy, that makes sense. So when you start layering artificial intelligence or AI around credit score, precision marketing, dynamic pricing, all on top of that, then they value that a bit more. But if you just jump into AI, the guy on the street has no interest in what you're talking about. It doesn't make any sense to him.
Thanks, John. Kat, are you ready with your question?
So I believe my question was to John, and it was what kind of cultural awareness to take into consideration when trying to teach people the value of following AI analyzed data.
Thanks, Kat. Again, let's take COVID, for example, which is the situation we're in right now. In one of the places, I'm not going to mention names, somebody was beaten up because they found out that he had COVID in one of the Africa. He was literally almost lynched to death because the people in his community found out that he had COVID, and everything they've heard about COVID is the fact that, it kills people, he's going to contaminate, it was just literally, it was a really sad situation. Now, in that same community, if you now tell them that Google has developed a product that allows you to contact trace and use AI to do what, literally nobody in that community is going to go anywhere near that product. So now, first understanding and saying, okay, well, if I wanted to build a contact tracing solution for these people based on AI, let me take, first of all, the social, cultural situation into consideration, to maybe make sure I don't actually tell them that this platform is going to tell another person that another person has this. Maybe just protect them and say, maybe if you enter a location, it might just make you aware that this location is high risk. those type of things, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. John and Kat, any follow-up questions to that? No? Okay. Alex, did you want to ask something? No, I think he might have left, actually. Okay. Who else would like to unmute and ask a question?
Sorry, Richard, if there's no questions, can Alice also answer the same? Because she's working with international communities as well.
Yeah, of course. So in general, kind of our approach is very similar to what John just said. We do focus a lot on understanding the local context and the societal norms and values, because it is really important to do the right job at it and like do it early enough, because it might lead to some unintended consequences, like most of the time negative. So similarly to facial recognition technology, or even like when we as a society of data scientists, we tend to kind of like make a lot of predictions because we have tools at our disposal and we can use them to just say, okay, let's isolate everyone during the COVID pandemic, right? But then in urban areas, in urban kind of like slum areas or in refugee camps where we work, the isolation wouldn't really help, first of all, because it's practically impossible. Or it can also lead to the issue of food insecurity and a bigger crisis. And a bigger amount of deaths, because the only way people can get food is by going to food distribution places, or sometimes just picking trash in some areas, and yeah, by isolating them and locking them down is not doing greater good for them, to be honest. So there should be some viable solutions outside of this. So even though the data and math tells us yes, we should do isolation and lockdown, we shouldn't kind of like overlook other kind of interventions and other strategies that might be more suitable for this particular area or this particular community. So I think it's really important that we always kind of challenge ourselves, and that's why the diversity is so important. That's why you need to bring people that are suffering from this problem the most into kind of like this co-creation environment where you develop tools with them and for them. And not just deciding what is good for them without like actually listening to their needs and understanding. So similarly, how we kind of did it with the domestic violence chatbot. At first we thought, okay, let's build a reporting tool because reporting seems to be so important. But then we realized that the bigger issue is not reporting. The bigger issue is to say to yourself, to admit it, that what you're experiencing is not okay. And yeah, this type of experience only comes after the user testing and user kind of experience research. So we have to do it all the time.